Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about Total Drama Reboot Season 2. Timestamps pertaining the episodes are in the description, my Twitter link is also in the description, and you can watch similar content that will be put above as the video commences or continues. And I don't like this season. I'm just going to be straight up. Obviously, I watched it live at the time during late last year and earlier in this year, and I felt like something was off about it from the very beginning, and I couldn't really put my finger on it as to why. So a few months passed, and I obviously watched it again. And while I'm softer on certain elements of it now, I generally do think the season is still one of the weaker ones. I think the writing is extremely poor. There are so many more plot contrivances in this season than in any other season. You can kind of tell that they just ran out of ideas, and this is the prime example as to why you shouldn't have the exact same cast in more than one season. And what stood out to me a lot more is that a lot of the people who made it very far in the season had nothing to do, as they just focused on the same few storylines over and over and over again, which really isn't good, and it caused the season to be extremely lopsided. And last season had a lot of focus on the gameplay and the strategy from a lot of the cast, which was missing during this season. Honestly, I'm just going to get right to it. So I found the premiere episode to be pretty solid in all elements. So we learned that Emma and Chase broke up once she saw episode 10 airing live once they got home. And I don't know why Chase never considered this, though Chase doesn't regret not telling her the truth. Though with this happening off camera and before this season, it ultimately indicates their lack of longevity on this season. Nichelle is trying to speak to people, but they, especially Emma, kind of blow her off, as Emma assumes that Nichelle will be voted out first because she flopped so hard last season. Scary Girl, who is dressed up more normally, or should I say, Lauren, is dressing more normally and is trying to change her gameplay to be more normal, so she can be more successful, since she saw the comments that people made about her game last season. Priya made Millie a TDI training guide, and Millie did not even open it, and I'm sure you can all predict where this is going. Axel is attempting to be nice to everyone this season to make it further, but she immediately pushes Ripper into the bushes. Bowie is getting glares from everyone in the cast, and is pushed by Raj to apologize, as his move with Millie and Priya was just a game move where Bowie essentially doesn't apologize. So the finalists of last season end up choosing their teammate for this season. So Priya chooses Millie, Emma to build an ally, which never happens, Caleb because he is hot, strong, and has an early acceptance to university, Damien, Axel, Z, who is now a soda influencer, and Nichelle, who has trained all year after being cancelled by Hollywood, and they are called Team Ratface. Bowie chooses Raj, Wayne, at Roger's insistence, Julia, Chase, MK. We learn that Julia and MK allegedly made a pre-game alliance, Scary Girl, and Ripper, and they are named Team Skunk Butt. Kale plans to get in good with Priya since she won last season, so aligning with the strongest player will help him out in the game. The challenge is to avoid getting hit with a water balloon by Chef's grandma, who is a professional pitcher. Melly and Priya are immediately booted from the challenge. Ripper recognizes her as one of the best pitchers ever. An intern is fired, and MK realizes that there will be an extra intern outfit. Remember this for later. Axel trips Ripper even when he isn't doing anything to her. Nichelle ends up winning the challenge for Team Ratface, which absolutely shocks everyone. Team Skunk Butt is going to elimination, and everyone is creeped up by Lauren, though she mentions that she worked hard to be normal, which doesn't work, as she studied all of them to be normal by looking at them while they were sleeping and hiding in their closets. Lauren/Scary Girl is easily voted out over Bowie, and she refuses to conform to societal standards after this. So I found it interesting that Scary Girl was trying to be more normal, and I think they could have made that into a bit more of an arc, and how she was utilized here is disappointing. Though it's clear that because she is mainly here for comedic relief and because she is so unrealistic to the point that she is a Packatoo character essentially. She really doesn't fit in with this cast, and because of that, there really isn't much room for her. But despite that, she's still one of the more likable people on the season. And I think it says more about the rest of the cast than her in this season, so yeah. Episode 2 is where I started to see the contrivance that would ultimately plague the season, with some borderline out of character moments and some ridiculous predictability. And this predictability being happening because they are forcing characters to act a certain way that they wouldn't have acted like last season, and it's not a way to show some development. So Priya watches Caleb working out, and she is too distracted to listen to Millie's apology for her poor performance. Priya and Caleb pretty much flirt, and we see Ripper asking Bowie for relationship advice about Axel, which shocks Bowie, who tells him to be up front. Julia and MK watch, knowing that it is going to be a train wreck once he approaches her, and it does not end well for Ripper, as she flips her food on him. Ugh, I cannot with the plot for these two this season. The challenge is that they have to slide down a few holes, where the smaller / more dangerous hole is the one where you will get more points, where the team with the most points win the challenge. Emma decides to distract Chase, knowing that he is good at this, so she tells him to focus on getting the best camera, stunt, and shot, knowing that he is going to overthink it when he films his own stuff. And this is ridiculous because, like Bowie mentions, they are being filmed on a reality show where there are cameras everywhere. But clearly this was just their poor excuse of a way to get rid of Chase, and it's so contrived. Essentially, Chase did not end up doing the challenge, and it makes the results of the episode very obvious. I don't know why anyone on his team didn't really stop it, since she was very visual and open and vocal about what she was doing. But it just adds to the contrivance of this. Julia is still thinking about potentially being an easy boot, which Boy set up, as MK told her this last episode where he chose her to be on his team just in case they needed an easy first boot. So Julia has to pretend to be a team player at this point. Melody takes the easy route for the episode, and we see her push Damien down the dangerous, potentially deadly 4-point slider, where she was supposed to go for the 3-pointer slider herself, and he was supposed to go for the 1-pointer, which obviously pisses everyone off, despite Team Rat Faith winning. Chase is obviously and unceremoniously booted over Ripper. While it was clear that Chase was going early this season, just based on the loose end that was from last season ended up being concluded before this season even started, the way they handled it was just very ridiculous, very contrived, and was very unbelievable. Chase didn't actively piss me off, but he didn't have much to do anyways, so he is ambivalent at best in my opinion regarding what he offered to the season. I didn't really have much of any issue with the third episode, which is something that I can't really say for a lot of the episodes this season, so I guess it's one of the better episodes. So anyways, we have more of the team isolating and trashing Millie, and Damien is of course rightfully pissed off since his quote-unquote friend backstabbed him and ends up yelling at her, calling her a ripper, which Millie takes huge offense to. MK is imposing as an intern so they can cheat throughout the challenge, because they're on a losing streak. Pretty much the challenge is that they have to race to the island to the finish point where the cast is sprayed by sticky sap. Priya knows that Millie did not read her book that she prepared for Millie and tells Millie that she needs to apologize to Damien, and Ripper follows Axel to try to impress her, where they end up getting stuck together. Millie gets a desapifying spray. MK gets a desapifying spray, and the Hockey Bros don't even realize what is happening. Julia has to tell them that they are cheating, and the Hockey Bros are saddened to the point that they are in tears about it, which I kind of found funny, and they refuse to take part in it, as they get stuck together by high-fiving one another and doing a other bunch of stupid stuff. MK sprays the two of them after their continuance of idiosyncrasy, or them just being idiotic. Millie gives a sincere apology to Damien, but he is a very forgiving person, so he hugs her, causing them to get stuck together, admitting that he needs a little push sometimes. Team Skunk Butt end up spraying sticky sap to themselves so they can cheat easily, though it's all on camera, so I don't know how they thought that they can get away with this whatsoever. Despite Caleb attempting to carry everyone on his team to victory, the Skunk Bunts win their first challenge. Raj and Wayne pretty much attempt to scrub off any cheating on off of themselves, and Melly is unceremoniously voted out of the game over Emma, where Melly pretty much regrets everything she did this season, where she should have read the training binder. While Melly herself wasn't really likable this season, I do appreciate the little arc that she got, where she took the selfish, morally wrong route for the cheap victory, since she felt like she needed to prove herself after not studying and preparing for the season, and it ultimately bit her in the butt, where she had to make amends with everyone. Essentially, she had more of an arc during her 3-episode run than a lot of the people did in the season, so she feels complete and you can kind of appreciate what she brought to the season, despite her limited run, compared to the others who overstayed the welcome and did absolutely nothing, and they didn't make her stay longer than necessary. Yeah, not a fan of episode 4. The contrived BS really starts becoming apparent during this episode, with how they handled the boot and how they tried to exaggerate certain elements just to justify the boot of the episode, and a lot of things really stopped making sense from this point onwards in the season, and it just felt inorganic. Bowie is apologizing to Raj about the cheating and claiming that he didn't know MK and Julia were going to do that, and Raj tells him that they won't be cheating anymore. MK interrupts them to tell them that she's disguising herself as an intern to get more info. We see more Caleb and Bria talking pre-challenge, though Caleb is really fine with Melly being gone, since he can have Priya all to himself. I don't know why he thinks this, because in order to be successful in the game, you need more than one person to be in an alliance, and Melly would have been that person, but that's besides the point, I guess. Axel is practicing her boxing, and she accidentally punches Ripper. She fixes his face, and after he tells her that he is into her, she rejects him, outright stating that he is not her type. If only things were left that way. MK tells Julia that she got nothing in the meeting, which the hockey bros are happy about. The challenge is about them answering questions with an A or B answer regarding the "Would you answer" questions that they did last year during the auditioning process, where the first team to have a person cross the bridge wins the challenge. Emma mentions that she is the only one on her team who doesn't have an alliance, which is definitely a bad sign for her, and she was in the bottom 2 in the last episode, so she needs to dominate the challenge. She advises her team on the answers, and they continue getting it wrong. MK decides to throw the challenge so she can find the answers. Priya has Emma covering her ears to give answers, where Caleb and everyone does the opposite answer that Emma shouts. MK gets back right in time, and Z ends up yelling to Emma what the team has been doing. What an idiot! And she now refuses to help. MK, Julia, and Bowie come up with a code for him to make it through, and MK gives the wrong answer to throw Chris off. Priya tells Emma to answer the question, since if they get one answer right, they win. Emma is asked a question about Chase, and she is told by Priya to choose the wrong answer, which Emma does, so they lose the challenge. It is an obvious Emma boot, since she mentioned that she had no allies, and it's clear that she doesn't have anything going on without Chase. Anyways, Priya is in the bottom 2 with Emma. After Emma is gone, Ripper ends up reading a poem of love to Axel, and it mentioned that she loves poetry during the challenge, and everyone thinks she's going to reject him, but they end up making out, and I want to barf for all eternity. Yet again, Emma had a chance to develop on her own without Chase, and clearly they decided not to do that for a second season in a row. Clearly, some people who made it far in the last season were going to be early boots here, and it makes sense why Emma is an early boot here, though how they handled her in our elimination episode was just very frustrating. She didn't interact with Bowie at all, obviously there wasn't anything going on with Chase, and she was just very forgettable in general. So it's just kind of frustrating watching how she went in the episode, and in general, she just really wasn't memorable. So I actually enjoyed episode 5, so some of the problems that have been apparent up to this point in the season, and becomes even more apparent later on in the season, especially with the contrivances, are here too. Caleb and Priya are racing to the dock, but they're interrupted by the sight of Axel and Ripper, where the other couple reveal that they've been making out the entire night, which is disgusting. Caleb keeps on mentioning the Alliance in his confessionals, and Priya keeps on mentioning their budding relationship, so we all know where this is going. Z catches Priya making out with the pillow, and she tells him that she likes Caleb, though she tells him to not tell anyone. Bowie tells Julia that he is not cheating anymore, and Julia says she agrees, unless she needs him to cheat. We have another scene of Julia talking to Bowie about it, where MK is in her costume mentioning that she is going to cheat, and Bowie is told to take the hockey bros on a walk. Nichelle and Julia end up arguing about how the former is going to kick the latter's teams, and Julia makes fun of Nichelle for flopping out of Hollywood and taunting her about missing the Hollywood life. It would have been nice to actually see this feud play out and develop more, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. The challenge for the episode is that they need to get keys. The Hockey Bros want to do the obstacle course, while Julia, MK, and Ripper want to do the maze. MK wrote the code onto Ripper's belly, and she gave the Hockey Bros skates to distract him from the cheating that is happening. Nichelle, of course, kicks butt throughout the obstacle course. Of course, we have hints throughout the episode about Z telling Caleb about Priya. Ripper is an idiot because he discarded his shirt, where Raj is able to tell that a map of the course is on Ripper's stomach. So the Hockey Bros are mad about the cheating, and Julia pretty much tells them to shut up. Julia pretty much sells out Bowie to the Hockey Bros. The couple end up arguing before Bowie and the Bros start a snowball fight with the team, and this is very stupid, but it was very fun to watch. Team Skunk Butts win the challenge, and Team Ratface has to vote out someone. And we don't know who was in danger really, though I predict it would have been either Priya or Z. Nichelle ends up seeing something on her bed and gets very excited. She ends up quitting the game because Hollywood gave her a contract to star in a superhero franchise, so she doesn't need the show anymore. So she needs to go to LA to shoot tomorrow, though they would never have allowed her to leave since they're sequestered after being eliminated, and I'm pretty sure she would have had to have spoken to her agent or manager first before booking any roles, so it's just a contrivance. Turns out it was fake, since Julia created the contract before the challenge as it was personal. And it would have been nice to actually see Nichelle's reaction to this being fake, which we didn't get, and that was dissatisfying. And the fact that we don't see Julia see this, which will be a theme throughout the season, is just even more whack. We do see that Chris is aware of MK's cheating. Since he sees her at the end of the episode, he's just allowing them to cheat, I guess. Nichelle is very frustrating. While it was cool to see her become a challenge beast this season, compared to her poor performance in the challenges in the last season, ultimately we never really saw her actually interact with anyone in any significant way, meaning that she was very isolated from everything else that was happening in the season, and from everyone else that happened in the season, kind of like how Topher was isolated on Pakatu Island. And the fact is, she was actually in a very good position in the season. Since she was contributing to the team, she didn't seem hated, and the fact that they made her quit due to something so stupid really just shows that the writers had nothing to do with her, or they had nothing for her to do, and she just ends up being underwhelming. And when you really think of her journey throughout the 2 seasons, she really just pales in comparison to everyone else due to her being so isolated and the writers not having an idea of what to do with her. Episode 6 kept my interest enough, and things were going up a bit from this point onwards. So Z speaks to Caleb, where the former mentions that the latter is hanging out with Priya. Caleb mentions that he doesn't like her like that, and it's mainly for strategy, and to get to the end, and it is clear how all of this is going to go. Z speaks to Priya, and now he is nervous because he claims that Caleb is using Priya for the game, though she tells him to not mess it up for her. We get more content of the Hockey Bros being dumb, and Chris announces that it is the merge. These early mergers are kind of nice, especially compared to many of the other prior seasons where they would merge way too late, but the fact that they did it an episode early compared to last season here is kind of disappointing, and I also think they did it to potentially save Julia from being eliminated, especially with the dynamics of that team. Bowie is nervous about not being able to control the vote, since it is now a merge and he doesn't have a majority. Chris also introduces the immunity idol for someone to find. The challenge for the episode is about canoeing, and they all have to partner up. Wayne is forced to partner up with Julia since Raj is partnering with Bowie, Damien is partnered with Z, and of course the two showmances are together. Chris makes it clear to MK that he knows about her stance, so she's by herself in the challenge, and he goes out of his way to torture her. Chris reveals to the cast that they have to compete against one another at some point, and he also reveals to the cast that MK cheated by being an intern, where everyone is mad at her, or the other team especially is mad at her. We get more commentary about the Z and Caleb thing, where Damien has to make it clear that Caleb is flirting with Priya. Axel and Ripper are now the new Bridget and Jeff, regarding making out all the time. Anyways, the person that is their partner is actually their opponent in the next part of the challenge. I said that too early. And everyone will fight until there is one person left. It is clear that Caleb likes Priya at this point, which makes the plot even more annoying, and they both spend the rest of the challenge looking for the idol after they take one another out, and they actually bond about their overbearing parents, and they want simpler lives. Damien, Axel, Bowie, and Julia are the final four contestants, and Damien beats Bowie in the final round to attain immunity. Julia is insistent on getting Bowie out of here, and Bowie is eliminated over MK. Raj is sad and gives him a snot napkin, where Julia states that she told everyone that it was Bowie's idea that they cheated. Yet again, they are telling, not showing, which is the one thing you do not do with storytelling. In Revenge of the Island, we saw Scott set Dawn up before she was booted, and it wasn't revealed after she was booted. Bowie had his back against the wall this season due to everyone watching and experiencing what he did in the prior season, just like how Heather had her back against the wall in TDA and Alejandro had his back against the wall in TDAS. But unlike the other two, they didn't drag him out too long, and they didn't give him a bunch of contrivances for him to last. Though they definitely gave him some story, especially with his conflicts with Julia and MK and his relationship with Raj, but they knew when to close the door on him, and he was definitely one of the more likable ones this season, despite him not being as prominent as he was in the last season. It's a perfect example of not booting someone too early and not letting them overstay their welcome. I found episode 7 to be a relatively entertaining episode, and it was kind of enjoyable, and it wasn't as frustrating as some of the episodes in the season. Priya and Caleb are looking for the immunity idol, and right when they are about to kiss, Z is eavesdropping on them, and it causes them to stop, since they heard his soda can breaking, or opening. Julia and MK are also looking for the idol, where the former admits that she would have been sad if MK left, causing the latter to tease Julia that she likes her as a friend. Damien feels the most confident person that he has ever been after winning immunity, but him tripping leads to him fighting the immunity idol. Chris chooses the teams for the challenge, which is Damien, Z, Caleb, and Priya. The next team is MK, Axel, and Ripper. And the final team is Rain, Rod, and Julia. As the bros are mad at Julia, only to turn around obnoxiously because she is now their teammate, which annoys her. The challenge is that they have to make a cake, but they have to get their stuff on a ship and then make the best cake possible. Everyone fights one another when they're on a ship in a fun manner, and MK is pissed off since she is doing everything on herself. She's doing everything herself, and the showmance is doing absolutely nothing, while actively ruining their ingredients. And we also see Julia is pissed off that the hockey bros are crushing their eggs to play with them, so she curses them off. Everyone is tired of Ripper and Axel making out, and right after Priya's team is about to win, she and Ripper reveals that they used his sweat for yeast. Ugh! So, Julia single-handedly wins the challenge for herself, Raj, and Wayne. Chris announces to everyone that someone found the immunity idol, and Axel is voted out over Ripper because she was a bigger threat than him. Axel is a bit ambivalent about getting voted out and being separated from Ripper, though this might just be her trying to be defensive so she doesn't reveal her actual feelings. And right as she is being sent off, he jumps on her, so he essentially quits to be with her. Axel was disappointing this season. I did like seeing that she was actively trying to improve her social game, since she knew that it was a huge flaw for her, kind of like Eva on Total Drama Island. But as soon as they paired her up with Ripper as a couple, she essentially did nothing else. She was kind of just his love interest, and anything else that was interesting about her was kind of thrown to the wayside. And it's even worse because they found this coupling to be repugnant and awful, especially since there's really no build up, especially on her side, and she was still being physical with him a few episodes into the season. So I just didn't really like them. And I feel like she's wasted potential. I didn't dislike, loathe, or hate Ripper this season, though I would most definitely be lying if I said I liked him. He definitely toned it down a bit with the grossness, and while I found his softer side to be somewhat interesting, the fact that they made him like Axel was just something I really did not care for, and how they kind of handled it was kind of pathetic at times as well. And like I mentioned with Axel, I really don't like them as a couple, and it's clear that they had nothing for him outside of Axel, because as soon as she was voted off, they made him quit with her, and it was just very random. In general, I'm kind of just ambivalent towards Ripper this season, but I guess that's better than seething hatred, so yay for him. I feel like episode 8 is the last decent episode of the season before everything completely fell off a cliff, though the elimination here is very contrived in itself. Damien is freaking out about someone taking his idol since someone wrote him a note about knowing he has the idol. It is revealed that Julie wrote notes to everyone in the game. Of course, we are not being shown this. Caleb and Priya are flirting with one another, and Z is watching them, where he is still struggling with being in the middle of this. MK speaks to Julia, who has clearly been avoiding her, and she realizes that something is off with Z, who is literally eating his pants. He says that he is holding a secret, and they know that they can get it out of him by lunch, where Priya also tells him that Caleb told her that he is into her. So she is freaking out about their first kiss. The challenge is that they have to insert their coin into a slot while hitting a bunch of bumpers to gain the most points. We have a bunch of segments of Caleb and Priya trying to kiss, but they are interrupted, and Julia is trying to squeeze out the secret from Z. Wayne falls off a cliff accidentally to the point that he is missing for a majority of the episode. And this is even more dissatisfying because they could have given him any chance of a story, but you know what? I'll save that more for the end. Z lets it slip that it involves Priya and Caleb, where she is tricking him into spilling, since she states that she probably already knows about it. Priya wins immunity, and right when they kiss, Z reveals that Caleb told him that he is just using her for the game. Of course, Caleb can barely explain himself, and he's clearly being set up to go. Until Z decides to ramble personal stuff about everyone in the game, even moving on to Chef and Chris. And this is something very similar to what he did in his final episode last season, where he just kind of went off the rails and they were allowed to revote so they can boot him. Since Z's purpose on this show this season is essentially over, and despite Caleb being public enemy number 1 and being the bigger threat, they decide to boot Z, though the cast is actively avoiding them both. Z is someone who is never going to be the protagonist of a total drama season, as he's just way too laid back. His main purpose is to be comedic relief. He's never going to have really any meaningful relationships on the show, and he is not a strategist. So he was essentially just an influencer who joked around for the first half of his season, or his journey on the season, and then the latter half is him overhearing Caleb saying that he's in with Priya for aligned purposes, and then he is a part of this misunderstanding between Caleb and Priya, where he's holding it back until he releases it so he can cause more drama between the showmen, and once that is done, his purpose is over. Yeah, he was still very likable and entertaining on the season, but pretty much the same old from last season. By this point, the season is just falling off the cliff, since everything is literally about Priya, Caleb, Julia, and to a lesser extent, MK, and no one else really matters, and there's very little joy in these remaining episodes, and it's just kind of a pain and a chore to watch. Priya is a crying mess over Caleb, and now she's just angry, and MK and Julia are using it to their advantage, as they want to boot Caleb. Damien and the Hockey Bros call them out for being cold and heartless about the matter. Caleb decides to speak to Priya after 10 hours, and he is still hated by everyone. The challenge is that they have to bring a large object to the area back to Chris and Chef. MK and Julia offer Caleb to be in an alliance, and he rejects them because he saw how awful they were in the last season. I'm kind of glad someone remembered how awful they were last season, especially Julia, but him outright rejecting them, especially when he was in a poor position to begin with, isn't really the brightest idea. Once they complete bringing their stuff, they are told that they have to destroy the stuff they brought into a shredder, and whomever does the best wins immunity. Priya is still looking at Caleb throughout the challenge, so it's clear what is going to happen. Caleb wins immunity, so it's clear that one of Julia or MK is going home. The pair make a deal where they state that they won't campaign against one another, but MK decides to not uphold her word since she knows that Julia would do the same. MK is voted out over Julia since Julia didn't campaign, as she told everyone that she and MK had an agreement to not campaign against one another, and MK realizes that she's been tricked and appreciates it. I really enjoyed MK throughout the season. I found her to be very humorous, very fun, and I really loved her friendship with Julia and how they're kind of just agents of chaos. Though she wasn't really the mastermind of it all, I think I would have been more interested had she been the villain. I do think she definitely improved gameplay wise, and while she definitely wasn't liked, she wasn't the most disliked, and she still kind of remained under the radar, though Chris definitely put her on blast. I do wish that MK made it a bit further in the season, especially since there are quite a few people who lasted longer than her, but offered little to the season, so they're just placeholders, where she would have made the end game a bit more bearable had she stayed. Episode 10 is just painfully stupid, and I don't even want to waste a lot of time on it. Damien hides his idol in another place, as he has changed where he hides it at least 4 times a day. We learn that Raj has food poisoning, so Wayne is feeding Raj like a toddler, though none of it went into his mouth. Honestly, it's just frustrating how abhorrently stupid these two are this season, and how they rarely do nothing. Caleb is still sad that Priya does not want to speak to him, and she gives him 30 seconds to speak, but he kind of just mumbles and runs out of time. Julia tells the both of them that they need to give one another the cold shoulder, as she really does not want them to make up, though I don't know why either of them didn't see through it immediately. The challenge involves them memorizing a bunch of squares of the contestants on the screen, and they have to remember it, since it will disappear quickly. If they get a question wrong, they will be punished, since it will disappear. And if they get it wrong, they will have to get punished for something and something horrible that is associated with another contestant, especially an eliminated contestant, will happen to them. Julia and Damien keep on sabotaging one another throughout the challenge since they keep on choosing the same answer. Despite Julia's messiness and sabotage, Caleb declares his love for Priya, and they of course make up, only to realize that Julia gave them both bad advice, which they shouldn't have believed her to begin with. Priya ends up beating Julia up, and Priya gives Julia immunity by accidentally clicking her iPad. How effing convenient and contrived on the writer's part. Julia is able to choose someone to be safe, and she chooses Caleb, where they made an alliance, or an agreement, according to him. Since she will save him, he will have to vote however Julia wants for the rest of the season. Priya becomes a mad woman, and Damien is booted over Priya because Wayne and Raj did not want to boot the couple, who just reunited. And it's clear that the writers just want to drag Priya as far as they can, even if it's actively making the season worse. So Damien thinks that he is safe because he has the idol and he hid the idol, but he can't find it, and it's clear Julia stole it. And it is another example of us not seeing her do a villainous act and us being told about it after the fact. Damien is very likable, and it was cool to see him actually into the game this season compared to last season where he just wanted to quit. At the same time, he made it to the 3/4 point of the season, and he really didn't have much to do. He won the immunity challenge at the beginning of the merge, and he found the immunity idol, but he got paranoid over the immunity idol, and it ended up being stolen from him. Outside of that, I don't really remember any of the notable interactions that he had with people, And I wish they would have given him an actual story, and I think he should have been in the finalist instead of the one person that got there. But we will get to that person when the time comes. At this point, I don't even care anymore. Everyone's just pissing me the heck off, and the plot lines are just irritating the heck out of me. Raj and Wayne now regret voting off Damien as he pretty much was a paranoid parent around them, and I don't know if we even saw them interacting like that on the actual show. And we have to see Priya being mad at Caleb again, since he is now a quote-unquote cheater for making a deal to save his own butt, or else he would have been voted off. Caleb has to explain himself to Priya, who now thinks that Caleb and Julia have been aligned the entire time, and he wants to spend more time with her. We have a MacArthur cameo, which is nice, where the challenge involves hound dogs, where they have to avoid the dogs, and if they are caught 3 times, they are out of the competition. So, whomever has the least X's ends up winning the challenge. Wayne thinks that Raj died because his clothes were on a dummy, and he couldn't tell that it was a dummy, since Wayne is a dummy. Julia is now threatening Caleb to vote her way because of their alliance, though he reminds her that it is an agreement. Julia ends up winning immunity and is planning on getting the hockey bros on booting Priya, but they refuse to really engage in any sort of conversation that involves the game, where they flip a coin on the toilet. Why the would they do that? On which person in the show meant to boot, which led to them wanting to vote out Caleb. Priya asks Caleb who to vote out of regarding the bros, and he tells her that he promised his vote to Julia, which pisses Priya off since it is not a smart deal. Julia speaks to Priya and says that the hockey bros are voting out Caleb, so she needs to vote with him and Julia or else Caleb is gone. Raj ends up getting booted over Caleb, and there really isn't an explanation about why Raj is booted over Wayne. Like, none at all. Anyways, Raj and Wayne have a sad separation like Katie and Sadie did back on the first season. There were moments in the season where Raj was very likable and very funny, but he kind of got annoying to me as the season went on because he really had nothing to do, especially after Boy was gone, and he didn't have a whole lot to do even when Boy was there outside of the cheating stuff, which didn't bring a whole lot of conflict in his relationship. They made him and Rain so much stupider than they were last season, and they weren't the brightest there. And him and Rain were very interchangeable, which was just extremely frustrating. And it annoys me that himself and Wayne were allowed to carry on throughout the season doing absolutely nothing and having no difference in personality, but Katie and Sadie were booted early in their only season and weren't given a chance to do something more or to show something more. So I do think there's definitely an imbalance with gender in that regard. I'm just numb by this point in the season. I just want it to be over. Caleb and Priya are reunited as a lovey-dovey couple, and Priya now wants to focus on the challenge, where Caleb isn't as focused on the game. Julia is annoyed that the two of them are reunited, and Priya clearly wants to get back at Julia. Caleb makes sure that Julia is okay, and Priya is annoyed that Julia is following them, and is reminded by Julia that Caleb has to vote her way, which is angering Priya. Caleb tells Julia that because his grandmother says to honor your word, he is going to vote Julia's way, only for Priya to tell him that his grandmother has never been on Total Drama, so the rule doesn't apply here. Caleb wants to remind or to tell Julia that he's going to double cross her, but Priya reminds him that it's besides the point. Wayne misses Raj, and we have a segment about it, which is very similar as to what Sadie got in the episode after Katie was booted in TDI. Julia dresses as Raj as tries to bond with Wayne as an ally, just in case Caleb backstabs her, but he's just too gross for her. The challenge is where the cast has to hook one another to a lever where they'll be put into a box that contains their biggest fears, and whomever is the last one standing ends up winning. Julia wants Caleb to hook Priya so they can vote out Wayne, so he is in a bit of a bind. Caleb ends up double-crossing both Julia and Priya, who are both bringing a lot of pressure on him, causing him to win immunity. Julia is voted out, but because she has the immunity idol that she stole from Damien 2 episodes ago, she uses it and her vote for Priya causes Priya to be booted. People are still shocked that Wayne is in the game, and right as Caleb is about to give Priya a somber kiss, she tells him to avenge her and to beat Julia. Priya is pretty frustrating throughout the season, especially as they went out of their way to bring her as far as they could. Even though if she was booted several episodes earlier, her plot with and relationship with Caleb would have been more tolerable and would have given room for others to actually have a storyline. But the way that she kind of went crazy, especially during her last few episodes, kind of made her a lot more toxic. In general, it's clear that she's a writer's pet, and while she isn't the most interesting, I actually didn't mind her relationship with Caleb at first, but with the way they handled it by the end of the season, you really just don't care about it. And it takes up so much time to the point where you just get frustrated. Priya is definitely someone that is way too overexposed, and it really just actively brought down the season. So I guess the finale is better than the last several episodes of the season, though you really don't care for any of the three winning because all three of them are annoying in their own ways. So Caleb and Julia are going at it, and Wayne is kind of just there. Everyone from the season comes back, and the cast will be divided to be supporters of the final three, where the returning campers end up choosing who they want to root for. Julia only has MK, Caleb has Priya, Millie, Bowie, Nishala, and Emma, though it is clear that most of them don't care for him, but really want Julia to lose, and Wayne has Chase, Z, Axel, Ripper, Bowie, and Raj, where they are all really happy for him and want him to win, and I guess this is the first time that they're showing that he had some semblance of a social game, but we'll get more into that throughout the episode. The finalists have to pull their team to the top of the wagon, then they have to walk the tightrope over a gorge, and then they have to run to the top of the mountain for the final part of the challenge, where they have to glide to the finish point. Scary Girl was not allowed to be put on a team since she doesn't play well with others, from what she was told, so she's sabotaging people in the second part of the challenge. Wayne is distracted by every single obstacle that he sees, and everyone is thinking that he is going to lose. A dinosaur rips Julia's hair, so she now has a mullet, which she hates. It is clear that Wayne is going to win at this point, where Caleb's team don't want to shoot him because it's Wayne! And this is clearly an example of the social game that came out of nowhere. But Raj ends up handling it anyways. Julia and Caleb end up finding one another as they complete the last part of the challenge, and Wayne ends up beating the two of them to the finish line. So Wayne wins the season as Julia and Caleb tie for second. It was clear from the beginning of the reboot that Caleb would have a larger role in the second season, but people didn't know what it would be. People thought that he was going to be a villain or a secondary villain, but he didn't end up being it. His main purpose is to be the love interest over Priya, and while their romance was fine at first, it definitely got grating since he wasn't the best communicator and she went crazy, and there's so many contrivances to drag the storyline out. Caleb himself is kind of inconsistent and not very interesting, and it's even worse because they don't really have him interacting with many other people on the cast, so he's kind of isolated in a way, and the one storyline that he does have isn't interesting enough for it to be one of the sole focuses throughout the entire season. At the same time, I don't get why he is so overhated by the fanbase to a creepy point of view. Julia is very likable and entertaining, especially with her mess throughout the season, and I really liked her new dynamic with MK throughout the season. At the same time, I thought it was a very lazy choice to have her be the villain yet again, and for everyone to kind of just be very stupid, forgetting about all the stuff she did last season to justify her being able to pull the wool over their eyes again this season. There were so many contrived elements that caused her to do well in the season, like them having to cheat so it wouldn't excuse her being an early boot, having an early merge, and all of her villainous antics were done off camera and they had to explain it afterwards, which just made her even more ineffective and it just made her very frustrating to watch as the season continued on. Wayne did absolutely nothing in the season. He and Raj were glued to each other's hips, and they made it to the 11th episode. They did nothing to distinguish the two of them from one another, and he wasn't even a leader like he was in the last season, and he didn't even do well in the challenges this season, as he performed poorly on most of them, and there are episodes where he really wasn't that present. It was clear that they're going for a WTF winner for this season, but I think there are better options than Wayne. And while they gave him something in the second last episode about how he would survive without Wayne, without Wayne, without Watch, it would have been a lot more efficient had Watch been booted earlier in the season and he actually had to spend a lot of time by himself. Overall, Wayne definitely did have his funny moments throughout the season, but him being the winner is just ridiculous. So, overall, my concluding thoughts on this season is that it was very messy, it was very unorganized, it had a lot of poor writing, and a lot of the cast had very little to do. And this is a prime example as to why there needs to be a different cast every season, or at least not have the exact same cast from season to season. Because with this, they didn't really know how to do changing dynamics in a more believable way, and they didn't know what to do with most of their cast. At the same time, there are a decent amount of episodes. Some of the interactions and the storylines are interesting, and there's definitely a decent amount of humor. At the same time, it doesn't really stand out as much compared to the first season, and I do think that it is one of the weaker seasons overall. If there is a next season, hopefully it is a lot better than what we got here. So I'm definitely going to do the game player tier ranking for this season, and I'm definitely going to do a lot more total drama content in the future. And I'm continuing on with my Big Brother coverage as well. Thank you all for supporting and watching. You can like, you can subscribe, and yeah, I will definitely be around, and hopefully things are going well for you all. Bye!